And that's what teams are trying to find out right now. We are 2 weeks exactly to the NFL draft. You have a handful of guys who you could bring in free agency to help you out in the secondary. But who are the teams right now in your mind that really need secondary help?
Well, I'll start at the cornerback position first. And when you start at the top of the draft list and you work your way down, I think the New York Jets are a very obvious one. They've needed help for some time. You look at the Giants, they have James Bradbury currently on the roster. We know that they want to deal him, so they're another team that you could be looking at. Minnesota has been trying to figure that out the last couple of years. Philadelphia is a team that really hasn't invested a first-round draft pick in a corner in decades, truly. The last time they took a corner in the first 2 rounds, I believe, was Sidney Jones about 5 years ago. You look at New England after losing J.C. Jackson. You look at Buffalo. You have Tre'Davious White coming off that ACL. They've been wanting to figure out that number 2 corner spot opposite White for some time. Arizona is another team. Cincinnati really wants somebody to come in there and try to replace Eli Apple. So those are the top teams, I think, at the corner position. Most teams all would love corner depth, but then you look at the safety position. Obviously, Detroit wants to pair someone back there with Walker. You have Houston having lost Justin Reed back there. You have Washington after releasing Landon Collins, so maybe they're going to look for a hybrid safety. And then Philadelphia, again, they need corner help. They need safety help. We all know that they would love another wide receiver, but Philly's always going to be in the conversation there at safety. When you're talking about the first round of the draft, though, I talked about how New Orleans, talking about how Pittsburgh, they both need safeties. I just don't think that they're going to be using first-round capital on a safety. Doesn't mean at all that they aren't interested in acquiring one soon enough.
And if you want Kyle Hamilton, you're going to have to use first-round capital, one would think, because he is #1 on CBS's big board. You've been breaking down these prospects at secondary positions, safety and cornerback. Let's go right there with Hamilton, who is, Pete Prisco will say, look, he's not worth a top 10 pick. He's not as good as some think they are. What do you think?
I've heard that from a couple of sources, some scouts who just sort of told me, hey, it's a weaker safety class, certainly at the top. And so because of that, he really rises up there. Listen, make no mistake about it. The dude's an absolute animal. It's 6'4", 220 pounds. He's long. He has range, as we saw in that Florida State game with this play right here, that is just forever and always going to be incredible. And he really showed out in that game. But you look at it and you just don't love how he tested, right? How he was a 4.7 at his pro day, and he had at the combine a 4.59. You want him to be a little bit faster right there. And so based off of that, his athletic testing, based off of the positional value of a safety in today's NFL, it's really hard to justify taking him in the top 5. That said, a team like, let's say, the Atlanta Falcons at 8, who they just drafted Kyle Pitts last year, they could draft a real playmaker and game changer on the defense and try to shore up some of the holes and gaps that they have on their team. You look at the Giants at 7, if they don't trade out of one of those positions, maybe that's where the draft starts for Kyle Hamilton. Then you can also see Houston at 13. We mentioned Philadelphia needing a safety, maybe one of their 2 picks. If he starts to drop again because of that athletic testing, because of the positional value or lack thereof that we in the NFL have placed on safety. But no question about it, he is a defensive playmaker. Just how high do you want to take a safety?
In Ryan Wilson's latest 3-round mock, he has him going number 11 overall to Washington. But usually the first secondary player off the board in his mocks is Sauce Gardner. Has the great nickname out of Cincinnati, just locked everybody down throughout his career. He's minus 400 in Vegas to be the first cornerback off the board. What have you seen from him?
Yeah, I mean, he will be the first corner off the board. I don't think there's any question about him. He's a guy who played 1,000 coverage snaps and never allowed a touchdown. You want somebody with some swag. You want someone who believes that they are the best corner in the draft. And frankly, his film and his tape, it's all backed up there. He is the top corner in this draft. And so you start looking at fits for him. And is it going to be the Jets? Is it going to be the Giants? I don't think he's going to be there at 12 for Minnesota. In fact, I'm pretty confident he's not going to be falling to double digits, but he's a guy who's very aggressive. He's a sticky man cover corner. He was a two-way player in high school, so he's sort of that converted wide receiver who learned that corner position early enough to where He was just an absolute beast there in Cincinnati. And at 6'3", 190, he's the ideal size. He has the bulk. And frankly, he has shown it against some top competition. Not always week in, week out, every Saturday playing at Cincinnati. But the fact is, in 1,103 coverage snaps, he has not allowed a touchdown. That counts for something. That counts for a top 10 pick. He will absolutely be the first corner off the board.
You called him a sticky corner. Sticky sauce. There's another nickname for you. Ryan Wilson has him going number 7 to the Giants in his latest mock. That brings us to Derek Stingley Jr. Coming off a Liz Frank injury. His stock might have been higher a couple of years ago. His numbers the last couple of seasons not as great as that amazing 2019 season. What have you seen from Derek Stingley?
And that's really the great question that any team that's going to ultimately draft Derek Stingley in the top half of the draft, and I can see the draft really starting for him right around 12 at Minnesota, and going as late as the teens for him. I think he sticks right there. I don't think he's going to go down to 20. But yeah, you wonder, okay, are we getting the Derek Stingley Jr. of 2019? Are we getting the guy who had some injuries and wasn't as good in 2020 and 2021? Not to mention, of course, he has the Liz Frank. Now, his pro day answered a whole lot of questions because he runs that 4.44 at the pro day. He has a vertical jump of 38.5 inches. And so, all right, that explosiveness is still there. The Liz Frank did not harm him in a way that's going to now take him to the bottom of the first round. I think that so many of these NFL coaches, I know that so many of these NFL coaches look at him and say, you know what, whatever deficiencies he may have had, whatever bad habits he may have earned himself the last couple of years, we can correct those. Maybe he read too many press clippings, but this is a guy who has the NFL bloodlines. This is a guy who has shown at the highest level in college football that he could get it done as a freshman, that the stage was not too big for him. And so an NFL coach, an NFL team is going to want to have that guy in their building. And so they're going to say, listen, the foot checks out. If it does check out with their doctors, and they're going to take a good hard look at that. The pro day was huge, huge for him to show that explosion. I can absolutely see him going right before we get into the teens there at 12 with the Minnesota Vikings, but no later than 20.
And that's exactly where Ryan Wilson has him in his latest mock, number 12 to Minnesota for Derek Stingley Jr. That's Jonathan Jones with us on HQ. We talked a little bit about the free agents and the top free agents that are still available, a lot of them in the secondary, like Stephon Gilmore. On the very latest Pick Six podcast with Will Brinson, they talk about the perfect free agency fits for guys like Gilmore, guys like Jadeveon Clowney, and OBJ.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.